Hello and welcome to the iCast. Joining as always is John
Howdy.
and Alex.
Hey there.
I believe you have one other person who might possibly be joining us here in a little bit, but we'll have to see if they pop in. So today we're going to have talk about something I think is kind of fun, which is the bad guys. Who doesn't like talking about the bad guys? So we're going to talk about our top five favorite villains in comic books. I have a couple of honorable mentions as well. But first, John, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing very fine. Thank you very much.
And Alex, how are you doing tonight?
I'm very happy to be here. Very excited. This is my first time on the show, and I'm super excited to share my favorite villains with you guys.
I am as well. Well, let's not stand on ceremony. I can talk. I can use words, I promise. John, why don't you start off with your number five?
My number five. I'll just read them off. And it's not any particular order. Doctor Doom, Vandal Savage.
Oh, just do your number five, and then we'll talk about that one.
Oh, okay. Do my number five. Okay, my number five is the Red Skull.
All the way down to number one too.
And for just some basics from him, there's been multiple Red Skulls throughout the ages. The first one was George Maxson, who appeared in Captain America 1 and 4, but then in issue 7 of Captain America, you find out that he's really Johann Schmidt, who is the hand-picked, hand-trained super Nazi by Adolf Hitler. The things that make him, for me on my list, are not only his charisma and his genius, but just how enduring he's been since World War II. He's gained cosmic powers. He's been cloned. He had Professor X's brain. He continues to be quote unquote relevant. And he's always a nasty Nazi that you can actually hate. So
given our current political system, he's maybe more relevant than he should be.
Yes. So he is my number that, but he's my number five.
Alex, what are your thoughts on the one with the red head?
Actually, I just spoiler alert, he's actually made my list too. So I agree with a lot of what John said. The thing about with Red Skull with me, the first thing I like about him is with characters, I always love a good design. And Red Skull has always had a classic, simple but effective design. Whether it's first, he's got the signature red skull that's just always so horrifying and striking, and it's like a symbolism of his evilness within. But whatever he's wearing, whether it be a green Hydra outfit or a black Nazi uniform, it's always so simple. And yet, that's what's so striking about it, is because you realize he's human, and that's what makes him evil. And the other thing is, like, going off that, what I love about Red Skull is the fact that he's evil. He's like generally the most evil, like the most supervillain in all the Marvel universe. I mean, a lot of times you've seen creators try to give sympathetic reasons to bad guys for why they do the things they do. You see it with Thanos in the MCU, or you see it with Green Goblin, and the biggest one is Magneto, of course, which I'll get to later. But Red Skull is just generally evil. He's just very hateful, and like he said, John says, he's very relevant to. He's always stood the test of time, is because he's a living embodiment of hate. Like he thinks what he's doing is right, and that's what makes them the most evil kind of man, is thinking that they're right, that they're not in the wrong. And going off what John said, is that he's a villain you hate to love, but also you love to hate, because he's just one of those guys where you know it's wrong to like love him as a villain, because he's like the embodiment of evil. But at the same time, that's why you root for him. That's why everyone loves such a bad guy, is because he is like an evil villain. Like he's like, if I guess I could put it like, just like, if as cliche as it sounds, Red Skull is the supervillain. Like he's defined, without getting cartoonish about it, he would be like the real world example of what a true supervillain would be. And I mean, that's just what I know. So, and like I said, John, he just always has some amazing stories. He's always been relevant. Um, but yeah, it's just like, first of all, it's a design thing. Secondly, it's this character. It's just like, I know it's wrong to love him and hate him, but it's like, that's what I kind of feel about it. I feel like when it comes to Captain America, he's got some rogues that really stand out, but none stands out more of the Red Skull. And I'm glad that he's his arch enemy.
So I like the Red Skull. I think the way you feel about villains and heroes, and it sort of depends on what issues you get into. So if I had to choose, I would have always kind of picked Baron Zemo as my favorite of that kind of ilk of villains, because I always felt like Baron Zemo was more kind of human. I will say two things about Red Skull. I always did wonder what happened when Steve Rogers went to take the stones back, because presumably he would have met the Red Skull, because the Red Skull is the one that's watching the Soul Stone. And also, the Red Skull will have hold a place in my heart for the fact that I collect the Bowen Marvel statues, a fair number of them, and I got the best deal ever off of the Red Skull one, because the box was like damaged and the statue was perfectly fine, and I got like, it was like 60% off. As an Iowan, I always remember getting a good deal on something.
I have a question about that statue. Is it based off the Alex Ross design of him?
I actually got it up right here. It's the one that has the interchangeable heads. It has two different heads. I'm not totally sure, but it might be. He's got like the real tight like Nazi leather coat on, and he's got like the gun up like this. He has two different heads. One of the heads is like the more kind of the one with the big, like almost looks like kind of like the Thing, heavy brow, and the other one looks like the skull. So
I think that is based on the Alex Ross. I was just trying to I didn't remember it, but was trying to remember it. Something you mentioned, Alex, with making them sympathetic or sympathetic backstory. Magneto always comes to mind. And again, it depends on the writer. I haven't liked Magneto as a villain because of that, because sometimes he's a good guy, sometimes he's a bad guy. But again, with Red Skull, he's always Mr. Nasty. He's always evil.
Yeah, it's like with cartoons, they make the bad guys so nasty just to really emphasize how much it's a cartoon. It's like no one is that evil in real life. But then when you look at the Red Skull, it's like, okay, even though this is a comic guy, it's like the sad fact is there are people like that out there, and that's what makes him so evil and such a great villain, because he is the pinnacle of evil. It's like you hear about all these serial killers or all these people on crime shows, and it's like, I think if Red Skull in real life, even those guys would just hate Red Skull just so much.
Well, to keep things moving, Alex, why don't you give us your number 5?
We already went with Red Skull, so I'm going with that was actually on my list too. But I'll go with the first one that was on my list, which is actually we were just talking about, Magneto. So
I can actually I just interrupt briefly. That's also my number 5. So we can kind of talk about him simultaneously. I love Magneto.
And I should imagine these are in no particular order. These are just the order I put him in on the list. So I'll be going down a list as we go on. So it's like Magneto is probably my favorite villain of all time, but he's like not number 5. It's just he made the list anyway. So as I mentioned before, Magneto is one of my favorite villains because he's sympathetic in that he knows what he's trying to do. He has reason for it. And he went through one of the worst things a human could. He was a Holocaust survivor. So he's seen just how evil mankind can be. So he has great reasons to hate and distrust mankind and to project what the Nazis did to him onto mutant kind. So as far as like writing for villainous motives, you can't get more better than that. I mean, they've tried with Thanos, they've tried with all these other characters, but it's just like Magneto, he has a real world reason why he would distrust humans and why he wants to make sure the mutants rule supreme. It's not even wants to rule, he just wants to make sure they're safe. I mean, everyone he gathers up into his brotherhood, he's also trying to protect more than anything. He puts their safety first and puts like his right second. Plus, Magneto is one of those guys who he's one of those mutants who's like, he's got one power, but he has used it in so many amazing creative ways. He lives up to like his status as the X-Men's greatest, one of the most powerful villain, and not just the most villain, because he's able to go toe to toe with not the 5 original X-Men, but all the X-Men. He wants I swear to God, I'm not making this. You guys know this up. He once ripped out Wolverine's adamantium skeleton right out of his body, and it's like, I mean, that's pretty cool in my book. The fact that he could do that is like pretty powerful. But he can also summon asteroids from outer space. He can fly with his magnetic abilities. He can affect electromagnetic spectrum. It's just this. He has one power, but he's a great example of a mutant that has that one power. And he can use it in so many different ways.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan. I think that if you go back to the civil rights era, the sort of Magneto and Professor X is kind of the amalgams of Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, Malcolm X, X-Men. Yeah. And whereas, Xavier's trying to do things what he feels is the right way, Magneto basically believes that doing things the right way is not possible because, these people won't work with you. They'll turn on you at any chance. And so you can't really trust them. My favorite little run for Magneto was the Cullen Bunn that came out, looks like, I think 2014. That was one of the first comics I got my wife to read. And she really enjoyed that one. And it's got this real kind of gritty art style that I really like. And it's kind of Magneto just kind of off on his own, doing his own little thing. And it was a really, really cool storyline, and I'd highly recommend it. John, what do you think of the mutant master of magnetism? The malignant malefactor known as Magneto.
I liked him up until about I think it was the 90s when he became a good guy, and tried to run Professor X's school, and that. What bothered me about that is it was too much of a character change so abruptly, because again he was like the IRA, in that fighting for freedom. He didn't care who he hurt, as in humans. Had these wonderful plans, very ruthless, and I guess I liked that writing style of the villain, but then again he got kind of wishy-washy. I haven't been following it lately with the current stuff with Krakoa or whatever on that island and that stuff. But he is a classic villain, and again, if he's written right, I guess that falls with any of these characters. If they're written right, they're wonderful as an evil.
And the thing about
Absolutely.
Magneto is, I don't just classify him as a villain. I kind of like to think of him as an anti-villain, because, in a way he's got a sympathetic origin, and he's kind of got a point where he's not, but he's like trying to do the right thing, but for all the wrong methods and reasons. Like he does have a heart, but like his heart is not completely with everyone on the planet. It's like it's mostly he's looking after his own kind. He like sees himself as a Moses to his people, which is actually a good comparison when you think about it. And I feel like he's one of those rare villains who can actually say is a true, genuine anti-villain. And sometimes, and you're right, John. Sometimes he does become more of an anti-hero or or the hero full hero, depending on who's writing him. And I think in the 90s, I think it kind of works just because I think he was trying to honor his friend's last wish or something. I don't know really how the story was. So I feel like for his character, that is something that would make sense. Like, because he and Charles were basically like best friends. They were brothers. And I feel like when you're at that point in your life, when you lose someone and you're like, you kind of blame yourself, and it's like, I'll try to do better for you. It's almost like when someone dies, your mother dies on their deathbed, you promise her like you're gonna quit drinking so you don't die drinking like she does or something. I'm thinking of that analogy, but I feel like it works. But what I've read with Magneto, the stories I read with Magneto have always been more the animated version. So X-Men Evolution, the 90s animated series. I read Magneto with the Children's Crusade about the Avengers looking for Wanda. And I got a taste of like how it's like children really factor in, and then I got to see him during Avengers versus X-Men and what followed. And yeah, I don't feel he's like it's hard. I don't really feel like some people really know what to do with Magneto these days. I applaud them for trying. I know that they just want to try to write them the best they can, but it's like, right. I feel like with Magneto, it's like you have to know where he's coming from first in order to fully write him the best way you can. You gotta somewhat it's like you said, put yourself. It's like one thing is I learned was like putting myself in my character's shoes. Like if you were this was happening to you or this happened to you, or you were going to do this, how would you react? And I don't think a lot of people are doing that.
Yeah, he's a. I think also there's an aspect to Magneto that he is a little full of himself because he truly does believe that he is the only one that can save all of mutant kind. And it's like, yeah, you're trying to do what you think is right, but also you think you're the most important. And I don't know if that's maybe not necessarily the case, but I love him. John, why don't you go on with your number 4? Or
My
I
number
don't know.
4.
Are you guys because Alex sort of said this? I don't really have a particular order either. I've kind of got 5 that I really like, and they could change order at any time.
Yep.
So I don't, just go with whatever the fourth, the second one you'd like to talk about is.
And I'm just going for my list. He was the bottom of my list. The skull was. Next is the Time Trapper from a villain from the Legion of Superheroes. He first appeared in 1958, and he was that was with Time Masters, and that was with Rip Hunter, believe it or not. And then he became a full-fledged Legion villain just a couple of years later. I guess it was in 64. And again, what he I guess if you want to compare him with somebody, he would be an example would be like Kang. He rules things someplace in the distant future. He controls the time stream. But what he does is that he prevents anybody from the 30th century traveling any further into the future, so they can't go into the future. So he has something called the Iron Curtain of Time.
Like that. That's very comic book.
And again, that it was during the Cold War, so that's where that came up with. And his powers, you're not quite sure if it's mechanically driven or if it's him. And he created pocket universes and fought the Legion, but then at one point you find out that he was actually one of the Legionnaires, and his whole thing was trying to keep the time stream going, and actually keep the time stream flowing in the proper direction, and that was late or early 90s is where that idea came up, or where they had that idea. And then because of Crisis and other stuff, they kind of scrapped it. But again, he plays chess with Brainiac. He's always manipulating things on a seemingly small level that have huge effects for throughout the whole time stream. Sometimes they've been benevolent things, but then most of the time it's to make things the way he wants them, but the Legion always stands up to him. So that's my number 4. And I don't know, are you guys familiar with him at all?
No,
I'm not a DC guy at all. So he does sound very Kang-like. And it looks like his first appearance was in Adventure Comics number 317 in February 1964. Kang first appears in Avengers number 8 in September 1964. So they're kind of very close first appearances too.
But that's with the Legion. His first appearance, though, they said was in Wonder Woman, Wonder Woman as the Time Master in 1958.
So it was technically a Wonder Woman foe first.
Correct, but it was a one-shot thing, and then what was it? Edward Hamilton, who was a sci-fi writer that wrote for DC, did the Legion, and I think that's when he incorporated that character.
Okay.
Into that. But again, he was a one and done thing in Wonder Woman, though. So
right. Let's say 101. Yeah, Alex, do you have anything to say about this? I wish I could say more. I'm bad at DC. Although I do have one DC person on my list. So
well, so do I. I have a couple. So I unfortunately am not as familiar with the Legion of Superheroes as John is. I consider him the expert. So this is a new character to me. But the way John described him, he does sound very Kang-like, especially that like the fact that his past self was a Legionnaire reminds me of one of Kang's past selves was Iron Lad of the Young Avengers.
Mhm.
So that kind of got me thinking. It's like I mean, which one did which first?
Actually, it was the Legion was first, almost
I
by a
figured.
decade.
I'm kind of the bad person to ask about Legion stuff. The only villains I know about the Legion superheroes are infamously the Fatal Five or Fiendish Five. Is it Fatal Five?
Fatal Five. Yep.
Yeah, and only barely, which I do admire as a supervillain team. And the only other ones I know are like the Legion of Supervillains, which the only members I'm familiar with are the exact evil doppelgangers of Cosmic Boy, Saturn Girl, and Lightning Lad. But from the sounds of it, it does sound like this guy does, he does sound like it probably is a good use of recycling on the writer's part. He found a character that no one was using and said, okay, you know what? I think of something I'm going to be doing this. I'm going to take this character, if they don't mind. I'm going to put my own spin on it. And hey, it worked. I mean, the Legion's probably got one of their most defining villains, if you think about it, which I think when you're a writer, that's something you got, you work with, you see something that like no one's using. Like if you have a good idea, you try it out, you try to do the original idea justice. And some of my favorite writers have been that way. Most notably is Frank Miller with the Daredevil run. He took Daredevil from what was essentially a cavalier swashbuckling hero to a gritty like ninja hero that we all know to love him now. And Stan loved what he did with him because he did all that while still maintaining the origins of that Stan had built on and all the writers that fell on him before. So I feel like this time, as you say, his name is Time Master.
Time Trapper.
Yeah, Time Trapper. Better name. That's a better name. I like more original. I feel like that's another good example of that.
John, I just have a question about this so-called legion of superheroes
Yes.
that you seem so interested in. I am told in history that a legion is somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 soldiers, whereas your legion of superheroes seems to have what, like 6 or 7 people?
No, I think there's over 20 active and inactive members.
Still seems to be about 3,980 shy of being called a real legion. It's not a big deal. I'm just saying, not a real legion. Hashtag not a real legion.
And I tell you what's funny is that early 2000s, Mark Waid was writing the Legion of Superheroes, and he changed it that any sentient being under the age of 18 could join the Legion. So the funny thing was there were over 4,000 and some members of the Legion, whether they had powers or not. But
fair enough. I'll grant that.
It's funny that you mentioned that because that did happen.
And one other thing I was going to mention, because sort of when you were talking about this Time Master, who's the original Earth One character, who then becomes Time Trapper. There was a big thing of that going on in the 1960s, and they did that in Marvel a fair amount too, where they would bring up characters that had been introduced in the 1940s and 1950s, and then sort of reintroduce them with the same name and sort of the same gimmick, but as just new characters. Primary examples would be Ghost Rider, the Vision, Groot, and a lot of these other characters where they had sort of popped up a couple times previously, and then they brought them back in, when the superhero comics got back going in the 1960s. That being said, Alex, I believe we are moving on to your number 4.
Well, I've already went down to 2 of my list actually, so we found out. But so the next one on my list is actually also a DC character, Sinestro. And what I love about Sinestro is I love how he's like this. He once started out as a good guy, but now he's like one of the most evil person in the world. But he's not. He's like, he went from one of the greatest lanterns in the world to one of their greatest enemies almost overnight. And the reason he did for this is it wasn't just like how the early comics made. He just wanted to be a criminal. He wants to bring order to the world. He tried it the Green Lantern way, but he didn't think that was working. So, he tried it his way, and in a way, he did dictate his people, but it kind of worked. So, like, it's one of those things. Question. Well, maybe does he have a point? Maybe is what our method or what we're doing actually working? Are we doing enough? Should we be doing more? I mean, Sinestro takes it a little too far with, but his question is like, these criminals run amok. I mean, is arresting him enough? Do we have to actually instill fear in them to bring order? And I always loved Jeff Johns' writing on Sinestro. That's how I got into the character, and I've always loved his Sinestro core. How that like all the members are criminals. It's so ironic, deliciously ironic that he's got a core made up of the greatest criminals, sadists, monsters in time to bring order. But I also love Sinestro is that I feel like his costume is a bit superior to the Green Lantern. It's more dynamic. It stands out a little more. I mean, all the Lantern their core designs do, but I mean, Sinestro's is like he's got that pointed thing going on with his, and like the color yellow, which is normally not my favorite color, but it's like I would wear that uniform just to be it. And I think the other thing is like with Sinestro, there's a lot that they brought into the concept of fear that I feel has a lot of potential. Because they're making fear out to be a bad thing. But the thing is, I feel like one thing they're not tapping for is fear being one of the good things. Because like fear is like what keeps you alive. It's what makes things exciting. It's what like if you're not scared, you're not alive. If you're not like afraid, if you don't conquer your fears, there's no joy of that. So I feel like there's an untapped resource that DC is not doing in storytelling. And if I had a chance, I would do that. Maybe not with Sinestro, but maybe like a new character. But I always had this idea. But it's like so yeah, Sinestro is definitely my favorites, probably for the same reasons as Magneto, is that he's kind of got a point to his methods and why he's doing it, but also with Red Skull, he's got a wicked design and kind of was like, it's how the mighty have fallen.
All I know is Mark Strong got ripped off because he only got to play evil Sinestro for about 5 seconds in a really, really bad movie. I don't know much about Sinestro. John, I'm assuming you have some feelings about this character.
Yes. So when I first was introduced to him back in the 70s, he had kind of like a turquoise blue top, and I think I don't remember the color of his
It was like green,
pants.
right? Like it was like green and black. It was like almost like a jester's outfit.
Yeah, and I remember that he was the polar opposite of Green Lantern, but I remember too that Green Lantern would beat him every time because Sinestro always relied on his ring and did not do much in the way of physical stuff. So he always wound up pounding on Sinestro, and I always just thought it was kind of a weak thing. He had this ring, he could do all those things, but he always lost, and I never thought of him as that interesting of a villain. But then, like you said with Geoff Johns, there was so much depth was added to the character, and it didn't disrupt, or it wasn't like everything that you knew before was wrong. Type retcons and stuff like that. It just made it really good. But I always thought he was kind of a second rank kind of villain, even though he was the opposite of Green Lantern.
I just don't know who could have seen that a character named Sinestro would go bad at some point. I mean, you just couldn't see that coming. It's just total out of the blue.
It's one of those weird things where like it's one of those golden age things that like kind of works now for a villain name, but it's like in a real world setting, it's like, how did we not see that coming? It's like, I mean, they stuck with it because it's canon and it's like been going on for so long. But what John said,
Magneto's group was called the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and it's like you pretty much know what you're getting into if you're like, hey, would you like to join the Evil Mutants with us? And it's like, are you guys like a community action group or more just evil? Just evil? Okay, got it. Just evil.
Well, it's like
evil.
Well, the thing with like the Brotherhood is that they can just drop the evil part and like they could be the Brotherhood of Mutants and like.
And I think they did. I think they pretty much did. Maybe even relatively early on, but it's just funny. Brotherhood of Evil Mutants.
It's like, and with Sinestro, they just hit that his last name, like Val Sinestro, which is kind of lazy. But I mean, like, how are you supposed to change Sinestro's name without people not recognizing him as that character? It's like it's one of those traps they built for themselves.
I thought his first name was like Steve or something.
Steve Sinestro.
Steve Sinestro.
That's his his dentist brother-in-law.
So I'm gonna go on my number 4. And I have a visual aid for this one because this is a little bit of a cheat because I'm not gonna lie, I did not see this character first in comic books. But I think he does have some of his great stuff in comic books. And that is something that just disappeared. There it is. Okay. And that is this gentleman right here.
Yes.
That
Dr.
is
Doom.
Mr. Lord Vader. And this is one of my favorite lines of his. He's surrounded, all the rebels have got him surrounded, and he says this iconic line. I mean, Darth Vader is one of the most easily identifiable villains of any piece of narrative fiction in our or anybody else's lifetimes. I mean, you don't need to know anything to know that's a bad guy. Like, this guy is a bad guy. And obviously, I first saw him in the movies and got into some of the comic books later on. But he's so good, and he has such great lines, and he's so intimidating. And I don't know if anybody watched the new Obi-Wan series, but maybe the less I say about that, the better.
I've seen the
but,
first episode. That's all I've watched so far.
I just watched the last episode today. It was it exists. That's all I can say for it. It's I feel like in Star Wars, we're slowly covering every single nanosecond of time in between the time that Anakin Skywalker was born and Palpatine dies again. And we're just going to keep covering every second of time. Like, how did Luke Skywalker get his belt? Let's do a 3-episode miniseries about that. Anyway, nothing against this guy though. This guy's great. I don't know, Alex, what do you think of Mr. Lord Vader?
Well, coincidentally, you bring up one of my absolute favorite Star Wars character of all time, not just villain or anything, but of all time. It used to be Boba Fett, but then I realized that I only liked it because all my brothers liked Boba Fett. It's like Darth Vader was like such a better character. It's like he was genuinely evil, but he had one of the best redemption arcs that he turned to the good side at the end, and he's never stopped caring for his son. That was the thing. He tried to get him on his side instead of killing him like he was supposed to. But like you're right, he's got a wicked design. It's like all black, but it works. He's got the hot roboticness to him, the cruel irony that Anakin sees that he's a robot, like with him with his other hand. He's got the red lightsaber and the choke force thing. It's like all these cool things. I mean, I've always said that if I were in the Star Wars universe, I would be with the Empire and the Sith, and Darth Vader is like, I would probably be Darth Vader's lapdog. But I won't go into how I wish that the sequels had treated him better. Like that's just an example of bad writing without filter. But yeah, it's like from what I understand, is like Darth Vader, even with the Marvel comics, like the modern Marvel comics, he's never had a bad run in which like you forget that the Darth Vader that you originally presented with is in fact a villain. It's like you see like every time Darth Vader has been brought into like the prequel meta or with the modern interpretations of other stages, he's always shown as doing bad things. You never give him a glimmer of hope. Like even the video games or the movies, he is genuinely being a bad guy, and you're constantly reminded of that. And it's like I guess like I think another thing I would like about him is like the fact that he's voiced by James Earl Jones. I mean, that was like a perfect fit.
Which, by the way, wasn't actually how it was filmed. It was filmed with the actor doing the dialogue from inside the suit.
Yeah,
which did not work remotely. Did not remotely work, and it's a very good thing that they changed that out. Good change. Good edit.
And on the note about Obi-Wan, I haven't seen it. I'm probably not going to. But I just thought that was going to be an origin story for Obi-Wan, like way before the Clone Wars, and like with him like getting up there with Master Windu. Was that it? No, wait, that was Samuel Jackson's character.
You're thinking Qui-Gon Jinn.
Yeah.
Qui-Gon Jinn. Yeah,
Qui-Gon
that's
Jinn.
what I thought it was going to be. And it's like, okay, can we enough with like messing with the prequels in the original series? Can we just get something new, like the Mandalorian or something?
Just two things to note. One, I'm sorry to say this, Boba Fett's a bad bounty hunter. He just is. I mean, he literally almost died. In the movie, he did die. They've retconned that he didn't die by somebody accidentally hitting his jetpack, and then he just fell into a worm and died. Like, it's like, that's not a good bounty hunter. Good bounty hunters don't accidentally get killed by somebody who just kind of like hits their backpack. It's like, no, sorry. Anyway, that being said, yeah, so the new Obi-Wan basically takes place almost exactly halfway between the ending of the prequels and the beginning of the original series. So it's like 10 years after the prequels and 10 years before A New Hope-ish. John, Vader thoughts?
I remember the first time I saw him on screen, and he came walking onto the rebel ship, and I scrunched down in my theater seat. I still remember that. Had no idea who this dude was or anything like that, but he was scary.
But you knew he
Uh,
was the bad guy.
Yes, yes. Um, and unfortunately, I have not read any of the current stuff, but I've heard nothing but high praise for. Is it Vader's Castle or something like that? Or I think is
Well, I mean,
the
he's popped up in the movies. I haven't read a ton of I read a little bit of this series and I liked that a lot. This was, oh God, now I'm gonna.
is that with Dr. Aphra or
Yes, I think so. I'm trying to think of who the writer was. I thought it was, God, I wanted to say Colin Bunn, but I think that's wrong.
um and again he's menacing, he's powerful, he's brooding, um he's loyal, but he's still his own man, really. And yes, he is conflicted, but I mean he's going to see it through, what no matter what it is.
Well, John, if he's so loyal, how did the Emperor end up at the bottom of a shaft?
It's because his son worked on him. But the
That's
other
fair.
20
By the way,
the other
the writer was it was Kieran Gillen and Salvador Larroca did that Vader comic.
On that note, I just want to say that he is loyal, but if I remember correctly, he wanted to rule the galaxy with Luke. So I think at some point he was planning to turn on Palpatine, or like at least
But-
wait out until the guy died.
but
Like,
isn't that always what the Sith do, is that they destroy their master?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the way it usually goes. I really hope that going forward, that they will start. By the way, they're doing a Cassian Andor series, which is going to take place right before Rogue One, and I'm just like, have we not filled these? Have we not filled this time enough with enough series? I hope they go back in time or forward in time or something. Just get us away from anybody named Skywalker or Palpatine or Kenobi.
can I just say one last thing before we move on from Vader?
You may absolutely say one last thing.
I don't really care about any of the new Star Wars stuff. I mean, I don't really like have an interest in it. I'm not as big a Star Wars fan as other people. I don't religiously follow it. I like it, but I don't really get into it like a lot religiously like a lot of people do. But I really want, and I think this would actually be good, a Darth Vader live action series. I would, in fact, watch that if it was true to Darth Vader's character. And
I just don't know where else you go from what's already there in the. I mean, the comics obviously you can do a lot of backstories, but as far as something big and cinematic, I just don't know where you go with Vader from here.
well, I mean, like
It's too wedged in. I mean,
Right.
with everything that they've done, he all that stuff is so wedged in and packed.
But thankfully, we know where Han Solo got his vest, and
um,
imagine dying not knowing where Han Solo got his vest and his dice.
But I guess, I mean, if I were to do a Darth Vader series, I would pull from all the comic books and all the stories that have ever been written. That's just like material right there.
I mean, if it was me, what I would do is just go back in time. Do you like the old? I mean, I don't know a lot about it. I've read a lot of the old legacy books, but I would go back to the old Republic. Go 1,000, 2,000 years before, where you're so separated from everything. You can tell a nice big, a nice big story.
Actually, there is one other series I would watch, a Yoda series, only because Yoda is my favorite Jedi.
I suppose you could do Yoda because he's old enough. You could go back 550 years, and again, no Kenobis, no Skywalkers, no Palpatines, and he could be fighting. Who was the Palpatine's master? Was that Sidious?
No, he was Darth Sidious.
He was Sidious. That's right. Who's the one that like taught him the secrets of eternal life or whatever? And then he killed the guy, which is sort of humorous.
Yeah, no, I don't know. Or because I've only watched one of the prequels, and because after the first one I was done.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
By
By the way, I mean, just the irony of saying, "Hey, this guy taught me eternal life. What happened to him? I killed him." Well, I guess he didn't really have the secrets of eternal life then, or didn't know him.
even they just did a thing with like how Count Dooku like broke away from Yoda as an apprentice would be pretty cool.
Yeah, but I don't want to replace Christopher Lee. I like Christopher Lee a lot. Anyway, let's move on. John, let's go with your number 3.
Number 3 is Kulan Gath. He first appeared in Conan the Barbarian 14 and 15 in March of 1972, created by the great Roy Thomas and Barry Windsor Smith. He's a sorcerer and was taking over or trying to take over most of the Hyborian world. And Conan and company defeated him, but his life essence fled to this amulet that he always wore. So basically, he's immortal. He and if somebody wears the necklace or whatever, he can then take over their body. So there's a big gap, but he next appears in Marvel Team Up, which is Spider-Man and Red Sonja. And a fisherman catches a fish, and then he takes it in, cuts it open, and guess what he finds inside of it?
The amulet.
The amulet. So he's taking it home to his wife, and he starts having these strange thoughts, but he's mugged and then killed by the mugger. The mugger does not resist the amulet. He puts it on, and Kulan Gath is alive again, and he converts all of Manhattan into an ancient Hyborian city, but only Spider-Man is not affected because of his amazing spider sense. And Mary Jane is possessed by the spirit of Red Sonja, and so together the two fight him. He later appears, and the X-Men fight him, and he does kind of the similar thing. But the reason why he makes my list is because how powerful he is, and he can warp reality in a huge way. And he's defeated, basically defeated the X-Men, the Avengers, everybody at one point, which again is pretty cool. And he's not that well known, but he's still out there somewhere within that necklace someplace.
There's a couple of really cool designs of him too.
Yes. When I first saw him,
the team up you're talking about, what year was that? Or like what eras? Are you talking 60s, 70s, 80s?
Late or middle 70s, middle 70s.
Gotcha.
John Byrne did the artwork for it. I don't remember who wrote it.
That's pretty good. I feel like for me, Conan is kind of a big blind spot. And I think it's weird. Like I watched the Conan movies when I was a kid, which are, I think, good for what they are. Obviously they didn't have the technology or the money to really do what they could do today. And then so I guess I just never got into the comics, but I think there's a real rich history of Conan out there. I mean, John Buscema, did Conan for like a million years, and did 100 million issues of that book. So
yeah, because he not only did he do Conan, but he did King Conan, which ran kind of a little bit later, but consecutively with that, and and Roy Thomas wrote most of that stuff, and he did do some adaptation of the works by Robert E. Howard, but most of it was all his own. I don't have the Conan one. I have the Cull one, but yeah, a lot of that stuff is really good. And so if you ever get a chance to pick up I wouldn't say an omnibus, but reprints or anything, and again, like you said, that artwork is great stuff.
Oh, yeah. Alex, geez, my brain is not working today at all, I swear. Do you have any thoughts on Kulan Gath? Do you know that character?
Well, cards on the table. I'm somewhat ashamed to admit this. I've never really read anything with Conan in it. I will say that I've always admired Conan as a character because he, along with Red Sonja and a few others, are one of the few sword and sorcery type characters that have really stood the test of time outside of being superhero comics or anything like that. So I have a real knack, not just for like his simple design and his amazing stories, but the fact that he's just a savage warrior going to war with all these bad people just to protect himself and these people. So I really admire him. But from the sounds of it, it sounds like this guy has really been a, well, if correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like Conan's long-standing nemesis. If that's what he is.
Yeah, and Red Sonja. Because he battled her at least twice. But before they did the time jump. I don't know if he's appeared since then. In this, because doesn't Dynamite do Red Sonja?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gail Simone did a pretty good run on Red Sonja over there that I liked a lot.
And it's funny you bring that period up, John, because I remember that reading about that style. And wasn't that also the series where they determined that Mary Jane Watson and Red Sonja were actually alternate universe versions of each other?
Yes, you're 100% right.
I thought that was awesome, and I was just like, okay, now I want to see like a canon barbaric Mary Jane Watson fighting alongside Spider-Man in canon comics from now on. Don't give me that fashion model. Give me like a sword fighter in a metal bikini. It's like, but like I said, I don't know much about specifically Conan, but I will say anyone who has stood the test of time along with Conan is okay in my book.
And when you talk about Conan, I don't remember when his first stories came out. It was probably in the 30s. It may have been earlier. And they were pulp short stories and that. But
all these it's like all these few of these the pulp era has all these rich characters that are just like ripe for using, and like they can't technically be used because they're all like they're all technically public domain and no one's really using them, or when they do, they don't really know what to do with them. But Conan's like one of those few that's been around since then who has just influenced so many characters. I'm pretty sure he also influenced like Superman. Like he was one of those characters like Doc Samson who influenced Superman in some way, because I know Golden Age Superman was a bit more of a jerk or a barbarian than like modern Superman is. That he actually killed some of his opponents, but it's like the only other character I can feel is like a modern savage hero is Exo-Man of War, which I've always liked because it's like I had this thing where it's like I don't read much of them, but I like characters like savage warriors in modern times, like Exo-Man of War and the Savage Hawkman. And I'm sure if you put Conan in like an alternate universe where he's like in the middle of the big city, is like going medieval on everyone's ass, that would be awesome.
Just John, it was Weird Tales, December 1932.
32. Okay.
Experience of Conan.
Is
someone writing Conan today though? Still, is he still going on?
Yeah, as in books. Yeah, Marvel just got the rights back. I just read that. Because I don't remember who, Dark Horse or somebody had him for a while, and then Marvel had him. No.
So he's just been bouncing around for a while.
Yes. Yeah.
It looks like Netflix is working on some kind of a deal with them. Anyway, let's move on. So Alex, why don't you give us your number 3?
Well, we've only gone to honestly 3 of my favorite villains so far, but I'll go to the next one down on my list since we haven't talked about it yet. The next one on my list is Electro from Spider-Man. And I've always had this weakness for like electric powered villains who have harnessed the power of energy at their fingertips and can do so much with it, like just zapping people or transporting through electricity. That's what I like the Infamous games. But one of the reasons I like Electro is that he's one of Spidey's most physically designed, distinctive villains. He's got that starfish mask and the green and yellow costume that works. And like, I'm one of those people who really does love the starfish mask. I feel like that's something that was genius on Marvel's part, and I love that they were able to bring that to life somehow in the Spider-Man No Way Home. It's just like that's supervillain, like classic supervillain design. You're not going to see much of those today with supervillains. And like, I'm glad they kept the Starfish design with the new Electro, Francine Fryer. But what I also love about Electro is two other things. One, he's not a villain that Spidey can just punch. He can't punch him without getting electrocuted himself. So he has to find creative ways to beat Electro, usually with water. But he's got to. But when that fails, he's got to find other ways. And that, in a lot of ways, he's like Hydro Man or Sandman or the Lizard. In that he's not something that Peter, like most people, can punch. You know, Peter has to use his brain. His greatest weapon is his brain, and Electro is one of those villains where he has to do that. He has to use the Peter Parker to beat him. But speaking of Peter Parker, another reason I like Electro is because he is like one of the most defining examples of the mirror effect of that all Spider-Man villains have in common, is that they reflect dark reflection and power responsibility. And Electro is a defining factor in that is that he has great power, but he forgoes responsibility, period. I mean, he's not like Osborn, who's like using it to build up a criminal empire, or Doc Ock take over the world, or Venom try to get revenge, or Sandman and Rhino just for pay use. He's just doing whatever he wants with it. I mean, he doesn't care who he gets hurt or who gets hurt, but he has like all this great power, and he's like foregoing responsibility just to do whatever he wants and try to make a big name for himself. And he's like, in a way, weird way, he's like one of Peter Parker's greatest opposites. And the ironic thing is, Spider-Man has used so much of his potential as in his powers and his brain, but Electro's been told that he can be the most powerful supervillain on the planet if he just took the time to practice and make use of his powers. So I feel he's a bit underused in that way, is that there could be like this huge story arc where Electro finally is like, you know what? I got this. I'm going to learn how to use it. I'm going to be a badass supervillain. And like, there's a lot of untapped potential with him.
And I don't remember. So the original Electro, did he die?
Yeah. So as part of the new Clone Wars with the new Jackal that turned out to be Ben Reilly. So apparently, Electro was having troubles with his powers because of Doc Ock, I think. Because when Spider-Man was Doc Ock.
Uh-huh.
And so the Jackal offers him, he promises not to only control his powers, but also bring back Francine Fryer, who he accidentally killed. He didn't get his powers back, but Francine ended up getting them. And then like he tries to absorb Electro's powers, and in the process, she electrocutes him. But he might be back. I'm not sure. It's like, I mean, name one villain that doesn't, or hero that doesn't stay dead for too long.
Right.
I don't have a ton to say about Electro. I liked him. I think he has a cool costume. I was kind of into Spider-Man in like the late 90s, not like mid 90s. Your Maximum's Carnage, who does not make an appearance on my list. And yeah, I think he's a cool villain. I think unfortunately he was not played particularly well in the his one film appearance. I think he was just kind of miscast. That was a strange casting decision, I think.
I did like him better in No Way Home, though.
Yeah, I did too. But I just don't think he was really right for the part. It was an odd decision. It was just an odd casting decision. But yeah, no, I don't dislike. I like him. He's not one of my favorites, but I liked him.
Actually, one last thing to say about Electro. One of the reasons I told about an untapped potential. Though there is one instance where I do think that Electro was used to his full potential. That was in the 90s animated Spider-Man series, where in that universe it was retconned that Electro was actually the son of Red Skull, and the whole Electro thing was a weapon they had been doing. And like Electro was so powerful, it took like the Captain America, Spider-Man, and like all the mighty Crusaders to beat him. It's like he held the whole world hostage, and like that's like a great example of using a powerful villain.
All right, I think I'm going to move on to my number 3. Surprising no one who knows me. I will say Kang the Conqueror, because he's just a great villain. So Kang has appeared as Ramatut, Immortus, the Iron Lad, the Scarlet Centurion. Am I missing anybody?
Did you say Mortis?
Yeah, I said Immortus.
Okay.
And
Sphinx.
he's one of the Richards. He's a Richards, right? That's
Yes.
the one thing I was totally clear on. He's a Richards. Nathaniel Richards. Which that's like, is that a descendant or?
We think so, because Reed's as far as I know, Reed's dad is still alive, but he's universe hopping and has been for a long time.
So he
And
could just be anybody.
yes,
Okay, fair enough.
It could be
But
Grant Benjamin for all we know.
what I kind of like about Kang is that, you know, it's almost kind of a metaphor for all of us, where you catch him in different portions of his life, and he is, you know, different. He has different experiences. Immortus is kind of a different character than Kang. Kang is that character kind of in his prime conquering years, his like his peak conquering age in his life, and he's a lot of fun. But then you get to see him as the Iron Lad, where he's like as a kid who's like trying to fight against what he's going to become, and Immortus, who's, you know, way at the end of time, you know, rocking beard. I didn't know a lot about Scarlet Centurion. I don't know if I really read much about him.
I had the issue, the annual Marvel or the Avengers annual where he appeared, and it seemed more that he was from like a parallel timeline than, you know, a direct
Yeah, it
know,
looks like
incarnation.
he's from Earth 6311. So he must be alternate universe Kang. But I mean, who knows? I feel like they can change those things. There's been multiples. So there's also a Scarlet Centurion from Earth 689. I don't know him, unfortunately. That being said, Alex, do you have any thoughts on Mr. the Conqueror?
Well, I admire Kang for being one of the most defining time travel based villains there is. You look hard, you're never going to find another villain who actually comes from the future to conquer the past for whatever reason. But the fact that he's had so many identities over the years is just confusing to me. I mean, at one point, I got to ask, where does the canon fall in this? I mean, I could accept the Iron Lad thing, is that he doesn't want to become this super villain, but it's like all these different points in past, and he's like, it just kind of falls in like how hard time travel is to write. You know, it's like you have all these rules that like you try to make sense, but then contradict themselves, and
And
that it's just like it's almost a villain that shouldn't work.
it, you know, and it's the only thing I compare it to, it would be say like the Doctor or the Master, but being that we're more stationary, we just keep seeing him at different points in his life, so it is confusing.
I mean,
If that makes sense. But I agree with you. It's just so what is it the Doctor says? Timey wimey, wibbly wobbly or
Wibbly
whatever.
wobbly, timey wimey.
Yeah.
but it kind of works for like God, who's that immortal caveman? Vandal Savage.
Yes, he's on my list.
It kind of works for Vandal Savage because like he's from the past and hasn't aged, and there are points in history where like he can be these specific people. I remember at one point they said he was Jack the Ripper, and I could like see him being that.
But
Well,
see,
hold off on him. I think we're probably going to talk about him more in a little bit, I would think.
It's just with Kang, it's like, you know, it's like the Doctor, you know, it's not like the Doctor. It's like, but I will say this: one of my favorite interpretations of Kang has been from the Avengers Earth Mightiest Heroes cartoon, like in the early 2000s, where he came back in time. His goal was to conquer the past so he could save his future, and more accurately, his wife. And he firmly believed that Captain America, a man out of time, was causing the disruptions, and like he had reason, but the Avengers didn't want to stop him because Captain America was their friend.
and that's storyline is pretty close to, you know, why he originally came back to the past, wasn't it? It was to save his wife or
Yeah, Ravonna. I don't know, his story. I kind of like that about him a little bit, because it is like it takes a little bit of effort to get to know Kang. He doesn't reveal himself to everyone. I think it's like you have to read a bunch of stuff, and you know, sometimes that never happened. You just think that happened. And by the way, apparently Immortus was actually separated from Kang, so now they are different people.
oh, I didn't know that.
You know,
So his first appearance though, that was in the the Stanley Jack Kirby run, original run. Is that, if I remember right?
Well, okay, so it sort of depends on how you look at it. Technically, the character's first appearance is in the Fantastic Four number 19 in 1963.
Oh, as
He
Rama
was originally a
Tut.
Fantastic Four villain.
What?
That's right. He was originally a Fantastic Four villain, right?
Well, this is where there was back when Fox owned Fantastic Four, there was some disagreement about this because while Ramatut first appears first, Kang is an Avengers villain, and I think pretty much has always been an Avengers villain for the most part. But then they retconned him as also being Ramatut. So it kind of it is in some doubt as far as what you consider his first appearance to be. His first appearance as Kang is in the Avengers as Kang. But again, if you're a lawyer who wants to, the character and you own the rights to the Fantastic Four, you could make the argument that he first appeared in Fantastic Four. Because comics.
It's funny because Kang has all the makings to be a Fantastic Four villain when you think about it.
Oh yeah, with the time travel and the super science, and
I mean that's basically what the whole like Fantastic Four Rogues Gallery is, super science.
Yep.
Well, I mean he's a Richards.
That's true.
I mean, for all we know, he could be Franklin Richard.
No, I don't think so, because Franklin, he's a Celestial, or would be the equivalent of a Celestial.
He's like a mutant equivalent of a Celestial.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I mean, they've given his name as Nathaniel Richards, but again, all this stuff can change because I mean, who's Wanda and Pietro's father? Depends on when you ask.
Exactly.
I thought that was high evolutionary.
Yeah, I think so. I can't remember. It's not Magneto now, I guess.
Right.
Except it will be again at some point, I'm sure.
It's kind of why I've gotten more enjoyment out of independent comics, because there's actually a canon and a timeline to it that makes sense.
That they're not.
All right,
constantly...
John, why don't we go forward for your number 2?
Number 2 is Vandal Savage. First appeared in the Golden Age Green Lantern number 10 from 1943. And then his first Silver Age appearance was in Strange Adventures 177. Again, he's immortal, and I think at one point he was written that he was a Neanderthal, but I think since then they've changed that he's Cro-Magnon, which is just early Homo sapien.
The Wikipedia lists his species as enhanced Cro-Magnon.
Okay.
Whatever.
And that's because he was fighting with another caveman, and they both got hit by this meteorite and the radiation, where he became immortal. The other guy, every time he dies, he comes back. He kind of reincarnates different bodies and stuff like that.
The reanimation man. Resurrection man.
Yeah. And I always thought that was kind of a cool idea, but
I think it seems like kind of a crappy power to have, though. Be like, if you kill me, I'll be born again, and I'll come back after you after 18 years.
Or I think there was a thing where the soul reincarnated into a little girl, and I think she went after him, if I remember. Okay, but besides being immortal, he's a genius. He's a strategist. He's nearly invulnerable. He's great unarmed and armed warrior, and he can bide his time, wait, because there was a whole thing with Rip Hunter, the Time Master, that after the fall of humanity, when, if you remember, Kamandi, where the animals ruled, he kept civilization alive in pockets, and then they were able to rebuild after that, and that was one of his long-standing plans in case of atomic war or the destruction of the world. And so again, even though he's pretty ruthless and wants to rule, or goes through phases where he wants to rule, but he's also watching out for the rest of the world. So those things made him, interesting. And my first appearance with him was right after Crisis of Infinite Earth, and Wally West fought him. And that was the first time I'd ever heard of Vandal Savage. And it was a good introduction to the character, after not being around for a long time.
Can I ask you, Alice Woody, in just one second? I'm just curious. Did you watch him on the Legends of Tomorrow Arrowverse stuff?
No, I did not. I did Legends of Tomorrow. I watched the first episode and it was just like, ugh, because the characters were so far off.
Because he's like the main villain for at least, I guess, for the first season. And I guess he comes back in the fourth season. Is like the main villain for that season. I don't
I
know.
think they were trying to make him like Per Degaton or something.
That he would be my honorable mention is Per Digiton too. But he's a time traveler. Pretty ruthless, but he always gets his ass handed to him. Excuse my language. Gets beat, but again, he's a world beater too. But he just relies on technology, but he's not immortal.
Yeah, like some sort of like time clones or something.
Yeah.
Alex, do you have any thoughts on Vandal Savage? I plead the fifth when it comes to a lot of the DC villains. I don't know a lot about them, but Alex, do you have any thoughts on Vandal Savage?
Well, I guess to continue with what I said, it's like I feel like Vandal Savage is another good example of a time villain that works because he's from the past, so everything that he has been throughout history makes sense because he's living it. It's not like he's coming back from the past at different points. And there's a bit of a canon to it. So I've always found it interesting. I remember like reading something that Vandal Savage had been all these like different lives, even like at one point been Jack the Ripper, all these evil people. I gotta say most of my affiliations with Vandal Savage have been animated. And interesting enough, my first taste of Vandal Savage was in Batman Brave and the Bold, the animated series, in which I believe they combined Vandal Savage with a Captain Marvel villain, Grog the Immortal Caveman or something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I don't know why they did that. I guess they just wanted to give some Captain Marvel villains a chance. But to me, it's like But then one thing I always notice a recurring thing with Vandal Savage is sometimes he does want to rule, but there are times in like, and this is example in the Justice League and Unlimited series, is that he lives enough. He's a good example of age does bring wisdom and experience. He's got all these skills. He's got all this knowledge. He has all this. He's experienced so much that he's able to use that for such evil purposes. But with that experience, he always changes. He always becomes someone new over time. It's like almost like he's being rebirthed, but like more experience changes him. And I distinctly remember this one JLU episode where Superman was thought to be dead, killed by Toyman, but instead he was just flung into the future where humanity is wiped out. And except Vandal Savage is there, but he's the only human left, and he's filled with remorse for everything that he's done. And even though Superman tries to beat him, he helps him get back to his own time so he can fix things. And it's like, his example is like, it's weird things like those. Like eventually with time, if you live long enough, you'll mellow out. You'll probably decide this is working. And probably it's one of those things that stick with me. Something similar happened in the Brave and the Bold episode where Grog, Booster apparently encountered him in the first time in the future by bumping into him as a janitor at the museum where he's not doing anything evil, just looking back at history. And then at the end of the episode, he like sees him there again. He's just still mellowed out. He's like, wait a minute. You remind me of someone I used to fight in the past. And then he's like, yeah, talk to me when I'm famous, pal. It's like, you! And he's just, it's like, but he was still very mellowed out. He just became evil there for a second just because he was upset with Booster. So yeah, Vandal Savage, a good example of age and experience does lead to a great power set.
Alex, let's move on to your number 2.
Okay, well, like I said, I I've already had most of my favorite villains talked about already, but luckily, my last spot for my favorite supervillains was tied with 2 people. So I'll talk about the first one.
Sounds
So,
good.
and I'll save the best for last, I guess you could say. So my second favorite villain is a Flash villain, and it's the Mirror Master. Now the reason I love I love the Flash villains. I love how they're all just blue collar guys, just out to steal stuff and have all this great power, but they don't want to be master criminals. Like Captain Cold mastered cold, Heatwave can melt Flash's frictionless boots, Boomerang can tag Flash at super speed. But Mirror Master to me stands out because he has the most original use of superpower I've seen. I mean, you can name a whole bunch of fire villains, gadget villains, ice villains, thunder villains, weather villains, but you don't know anyone who uses mirrors like Mirror Master. And he can do all sorts of cool stuff with his mirrors dimension. He can travel through them. He can beat someone up just through their sunglasses if there's a reflection. He can create illusions, like all this stuff. He can like really mesmerize and hypnotize the Flash. It's one of those things that like I feel is very underrated in the Flash's Rose Gown that you don't see him much used of because he's always overshadowed by Grodd or Reverse Flash or Captain Cold, which I'll get into in a little bit. But I feel like Mirror Master has like potential to be one of Flash's greatest supervillains. And for a while he was right up there as one of the main. Because there were 2 different like Mirror Masters. There was Sam Scudder, and then there was the other one. I'm not sure which one came first, but
Just real quick, Alex. I guess there's actually been 3. I don't know if maybe these are newer. There's Samuel Joseph Scooter, George Digger Harkness, and Evan McCullough.
okay, maybe okay. But so there have been 3, but each one they've just had this incredible power that you are not going to be able to find anywhere else. You know, I mean, look at DC, look at Marvel, even look at all the independent stuff. You don't have someone who can use mirrors to that effect or illusions like that. Maybe Mysterio, but that's all CGI. So I feel like Mirror Master deserves a spot in my favorite list just for that. He stands out alone. Plus, he's got a cool, simple design.
I just like to say, and I don't know this character again. It's DC. I have to mostly plead the fifth again. I do kind of like thug characters, like characters that aren't trying to take over the world. Characters that are just like, hey, I'm just trying to make like 3 good scores so I can move to a beach in Tahiti and put away the costume and all this stuff. Like they're not in it for like the world domination or anything like that. John, what is your Mirror Master thoughts?
When I again back in the 70s, I thought he was the most interesting of the rogues. And I thought he was top tier. I meant probably the most deadly because of all the things he could do. I mean, even Captain Cold, really couldn't stop the Flash, even though he could bring things to absolute zero, or and even the Reverse Flash, Flash always beat. But Mirror Master did stuff where trap the Flash inside of a mirror, or would bounce around through mirrors and steal stuff, and then so you couldn't stop him. Or one time he switched the bottom half of his body with the Flash's, and so he could run super fast and Flash couldn't. But what he did was Flash did a handstand and ran super fast, and that's how he beat him. But he again, it was unique powers, unique use of those powers, and again, I can't think of anybody that's even close to that, or I mean, there's people with gadgets and stuff like that, but again, his gadgets kind of that one theme, but they do it in so many wonderful ways.
I have a question sort of tangential that I think is interesting. We sort of talked about a Spider-Man rogue in Electro, and we've talked about a Flash rogue in Mirror Master. Nobody has yet mentioned any of the rogues from a certain rodent-themed superhero. But it really is like, you don't really think of most hero, like we sort of think of those 3, Batman, Spider-Man, and Flash as having this sort of rogues gallery. But not many other superheroes have this sort of rich rogues gallery that they do. I can't really think of hardly. I mean, I guess you could say Superman to some degree. But I mean, even Superman, like as far as people that don't know about Superman are probably not going to know very many of. They'll know Lex Luthor, and they'll know,
Bizarro.
maybe Bizarre. Well, I was thinking maybe Brainiac or maybe Doomsday, which is kind of sucks because Doomsday is not a very good villain. But I mean, I'm trying to think of any other superhero that I could think of that has like that big rich rogues gallery, and I can't really think of anybody.
You know,
I have one. It probably won't count unless you really get into a series, but I think like Invincible does.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
not real familiar with that. That could be true.
I was gonna say, I mean, because even if you think of Thor, other than Loki, um, there haven't been. I mean, there's been some repeat villains, but he doesn't have a rogues gallery of or anything like that. I mean, Green Lantern doesn't. That you
Maybe
know that.
Daredevil, although I feel like Daredevil kind of shares his rogues gallery with Spider-Man a lot of the times.
Yeah.
Actually, I feel like I mean you have to really know Daredevil's rogues gallery to kind
I mean,
of
like,
name a few. I could name a
Electro,
few.
Bullseye, Kingspin. Electro, Bullseye, Kingpin. Those are, I think, pretty, well known.
What wasn't the Owl and
Yeah,
Stiltman?
Owl, Gladiator.
Oh, Glad.
Uh,
Yep.
John, we're talking well-known rogues, and you brought
Okay.
up Stiltman. I just
Okay,
want to point that out.
The Jester. And I just want to say something real quick before
Everybody's
we move on.
favorite paste pot Pete. Go ahead. Sorry.
I just want to say one quick thing about Daredevil. I always thought Daredevil had like more of an extensive rogues gallery than was being utilized outside of Bullseye and Daredevil. And I always thought that Daredevil's rogues gallery could be on par with Batman and Spider-Man if they got like a real Bruce Timm treatment. Like they took these characters and really put a Mr. Freeze, like revamped spin on them that really made them work. Like there's like so much you could do with them that's like not being used. I think would that be really cool.
Maybe one of these days on here we'll do a best rogues gallery, except that's with the caveat of no Batman, no Spider-Man, no Flash.
I would like to do that. Yes.
Because that would, I think that
I-
would be an interesting
I
challenge.
think that's a good idea for the next topic. Or you
Yeah,
know,
it
for
could be like
for next
top
show.
5 next rogues galleries, top 5 favorite rogues galleries outside those 3.
That being said, I think I am going to go on to my number 2. If everybody's ready, I think kind of a one out of the blue, but I loved him. I don't love these comics as much as I did when I was younger, but that character always stuck with me, and that is Herr Starr of the Grail. For people that are fans of the Preacher series, which I definitely am, I've got his little thing up here. I'll get his little. Anyway, he's basically just like an evil CIA agent, except instead of being in the CIA, he's in this sort of CIA of the Catholic Church, and he's attempting to kill Jesse Custer, the preacher, or use him. It's sometimes not entirely clear. What I love about him is he's this horrible, villainous, just bad guy who does all these terrible things, but he's also an entire goofball. Like, for example, Jesse, so he's bald, and Jesse Custer, after one of their, not really battles, because Jesse Custer can beat him easily, but he cuts on the top of his head, which is funny because Star is bald, so it makes him look like, well, you can imagine
A butthead.
the other side. And so there's like a scene where he's like trying on different wigs and hats to try and cover that up, and he's just like he's massively immoral, and just does drugs all the time, all this other stuff. He's just a really, really bad guy, but he's so straight-laced and so like serious that he becomes kind of a parody of himself, and he's great fun. Have you guys read Preacher,
No, but I've seen the AMC.
the TV show?
Yeah, and I still remember I guess it was the tryouts for the team to find
Yes.
the best of the best.
I think his method of getting out of that chokehold was certainly unique. I won't mention it here because we're family friendly, but he certainly, and by the way, I think they cast him absolutely perfectly. He absolutely embodied the character directly out of just stepped right out of the comic book. I couldn't imagine casting anybody else in that role. Alex, are you familiar with Preacher at all?
I know the series. I have not read it. I'm not that familiar with it. I know that it's not exactly family friendly, but I do know it is one of the most iconic indie comics there are. That's not superhero, or is it superhero?
Not really.
Yeah, no, no, not really. There's vampires, and I don't know. It's hard to classify things, I think, sometimes.
from my understanding, Preacher is like this very dark fiction, dark humor kind of series. It's like Southport Park on steroids or something. I don't know, but it's like, I mean, I guess my biggest question to you is, I mean, well, you probably are, is you thought that they did that character justice, because
Oh, very
I know
much
it's like live
And
action.
the show cast him absolutely flawlessly. I mean, it's one of those. It's kind of a smaller show, and so when you're talking about best cast superheroes or supervillains or whatever, he would probably be on that list. I mean, just perfectly cast for what he was. Very very well done.
No.
Now, before we go on to our number ones, I thought I would kind of run around the table real quickly and just see if you guys had any honorable mentions that you wanted to honorably mention.
I was gonna suggest Lex Luthor, but it's the Silver Age Lex Luthor, not the present Lex Luthor. Again, genius, driven, out to make a buck, but also take over the world if you could do it too. Exactly. So I would say Lex Luthor would be an honorable mention.
Alex, do you have any honorable mentions you wanted to also honorably mention?
Well, I'm not sure if this would count as a comic book villain because she's been in comic books, but since you mentioned Darth Vader, I'm going to mention her. This is actually one of my favorite villains, as Princess Azula from Avatar. And I feel like she's like a great example, mirror from Zuko, is that Zuko had like a great tragic redemption, but Azula had a very tragic downfall. Is like the ironic thing is that what I really like about her is that I feel like she's underused in comics. I feel like she deserves a redemption arc too, because like there's probably so much to her story with Ozai and her mother that's left untapped that is probably not being seen. I mean, they both were child of Ozai. That could not have been pretty easy being Ozai's favorite child growing up. I mean, she got to screw up so much, and it's like she has the same goodness genes in Zula and Zuko that he does, and I just feel like even if she were like given a redemption arc, I feel like she would be like a great story. It'd be like up there with Korra level or Kyoshi level. Awesome.
I'm not super familiar with Avatar, but I know it's a very, very well reviewed and well beloved series. I'll watch it at some point.
Yeah.
I've got a few honorable mentions. The first one is the Saint of Killers, also from Preacher. Like I said, Preacher on the Brain. I love his powers. His powers are this: he can never die. Whatever he shoots at, he hits, and whatever he hits dies. That's his full power list. It's basically he can kill anything he shoots and he can never die. Actually, the second one I'm not going to mention because I think John might mention him next. Ultron. I love Ultron. I think he's my favorite Avengers film that didn't make it to my top 10 or to my top 5 list. I love it. He's like pure just rage and anger, which is why I kind of hated the portrayal of him in the second Avengers movie. I think that I love James Spader, and James Spader's great, but I just don't think he nailed the character. And I was thinking about this when we were talking about Hair Star. It made me think of another comic book that has been changed, turned into a very gritty television show, and that is The Boys. And I would like to honorably mention Homelander, because both in the comic and in the show, he is absolutely a terrifying creature. He's like if Superman had absolutely no morals and was just id, basically. And
so you feel that out of all the thousands of evil Superman archetypes there have been, you feel like he's one of the better ones?
Well, the thing is, Homelander's not evil. That he's not trying to take over the world. He is id. He is want and desire, and that's it. He is insecure, which so he's constantly kind of feels like he needs to prove himself. He's like Superman if Superman was a really bad human, like a human that was just filled with flaws and insecurities and pettiness and just all the bad things all the bad human traits you can think of. Because that's the thing on The Boys, like the superheroes aren't really superheroes, they're just people that were given this drug V that gave them superpowers. And Homelander is just this person who was raised very badly. He was never had parents. He was just raised by this corporation, and because of that, he is this incredibly flawed, awful person. And I think that's scarier than evil in a lot of ways. Because I'll tell you what, you talk to Victor Von Doom or Magneto or Lex Luthor, you might be able to reason with them because they're intelligent, they know what's going on, and so maybe you could reason your way out of it and say, hey, you shouldn't kill me because this, that, or the other thing. But Homelander might kill you just because he's in a bad mood, and totally out of pettiness, because some somebody unliked one of his tweets on Twitter or whatever. And I think that's so much scarier than evil. Anyway, that being said, I think we'll go John. What is your number one?
Victor Von Doom.
Heard of him?
First appearance in Fantastic Four #5. He's the penultimate villain. I think, again, not just because of power level, but he's moral. He's flawed in that he's vain. He's genius. He's a strategist. He's a master of science, as well as was one person away from being Sorcerer Supreme for a while. He's got a tragic story. There's times where it seems like he's he's working towards redemption, but then sacrifices that for his own gains at times. And just a complex character that, again, even some bad writing still has had some really good stories with him. And again, he's a classic because, I mean, he's still around. He's still a threat. He could still be a savior. So he's my number one, is Dr. Doom.
He was my other honorable mention that I didn't, because I kind of thought he would pop up. One thing I think is interesting about Doom, and this is outside of the character and more into the publishing side of things, that I kind of think about, he's the evil version of Spider-Man, in that whenever they wanted to introduce a new character, to sort of get them over, they would put Spider-Man in the book. And if you wanted to have a new character and sort of, induct them into the Marvel universe, they've got to fight Dr. Doom. Like, Dr. Doom is the one you bring in, because he's traditionally a Fantastic Four villain, but obviously they had to bring him into the Avengers early on because, every new team has to fight Dr. Doom. He's like the main villain of, he's the end boss of Marvel.
Yes.
Alex, what are your thoughts on Mr. the Doom? I'm sorry, let me use his title, Doctor.
Well, I agree with
Which is honorary, I've heard. It's an honorary title. It's honorary.
Well, I definitely agree with everything you guys say. One of the reasons I like Dr. Doom is because he was always cited as Stan Lee's favorite supervillain of all time. And the reason Stan said this, those were always said to me. He said he loved Dr. Doom because he said Dr. Doom could walk up to a policeman and say, "I'm going to take over the world," and the policeman would do nothing because that's not a crime to break. That's not literally a law that he's breaking. He's technically not doing anything wrong. He's just trying to take over the world, but you can't arrest him for that. And I always found that humorous. And I definitely agree that Dr. Doom has outgrown being a Marvel Fantastic Four villain. Now he's a Marvel Universe villain, on not just on Earth scale, but on a galactic scale. And it's funny because I always, with the live action, people always think that he's the Fantastic Four villain, but he's not the Fantastic Four. I feel like he's the most iconic, but not necessarily the villain to have in a live action movie. Or so he's definitely become more of a big universe villain, especially with the Avengers. And that's what I've always felt like when Fantastic Four are brought into the MCU. I'm hoping that Dr. Doom is not the villain they fight, but I feel like Dr. Doom will be like the next Loki or the next Thanos, and that he's not going to be made for the Fantastic Four. He's going to be made for the entire universe. He's going to be like a threat to the entire universe that they're all going to collectively have to fight together. Like, I'm hoping that the next story in the MCU, that if it has Dr. Doom, is going to be about the Beyonder, Doom getting that power.
It could be. I was going to say, lost my train of thought. It's interesting. I was just looking at his Wikipedia, and it's funny to look at his list of abilities. And it's genius intellect, master of science and dark arts, mind transference and technopathy, hypnotism, expert in hand-to-hand combat, peak human conditioning, indomitable will, power armor grants superhuman strength, gauntlet lasers and force blasts, flight, force field generation, and various high-tech weapons and gadgets. So his power is basically just all the above.
Yes.
Oh, I remember. I remember when I. Do you guys remember when they used to do the little Marvel trading cards back in I think the early '90s? And one of my favorite ones was Doctor Doom, and it said, like he would have like a little quote from the character, and he'd be like, "I rule with an iron fist and boot and face." Yeah, he's a good one. He's a good one. I'm really going to be interested to see who they end up casting because I mean, if they're bringing in Fantastic Four, I mean, we've already seen a Fantastic Four member in a Marvel property, which I think was kind of exciting. So they're
Yeah,
going to
that's a
have to
big
cast
surprise
Doom
for me.
eventually, and I'm going to be really interested who they do.
Who was the guy? I'd heard, and I cannot remember his name. I think he's German, but he was in Django Unchained.
Oh, you mean Christoph Waltz?
Yes.
That could work.
I'd heard that was bandied about, but I don't know if that's
But
just a fan rumor.
Didn't Christopher Waltz play the Doctor in Captain America?
No, you're thinking of another actor whose name now is not in my brain because my brain is broken.
They both had bushy beards and German accents, so I guess I got confused.
No, I'll tell you in a second. Alex, say all the good things you think about Doctor Doom while I look that up.
Okay, well, actually, while we're talking Doctor Doom in the MCU, I really hope we don't see Doctor Doom's like face before he becomes Doctor Doom. Hope that when he's introduced, we just see him just as the mask and like anything is going to be grotesque. Like, I mean, everyone at this point knows Doctor Doom's origin. I'd feel like I'd just be more interested in seeing Doom the character and not the person. Just like give us Doctor Doom as already a villain. It's like I mean, John might not feel the same way, but I'm just like that's just.
Oh, I agree. I agree. 100%. It's just like when they introduced the FF. We do not need an origin story.
I mean,
Yeah, we've seen their origin story a couple times, and I think with Spider-Man, with the new Spider-Man movies are Sans origin story, and they work just fine. In fact, I think they work better. By the way, Alex, the person you're thinking of is Stanley Tucci. Stanley Tucci,
that's it.
Yeah, I agree entirely. I think just give us Doom, just have Doom be there, and if it works and people like it, then you can do origin stuff in future movies, or you can do little origin stuff sprinkled in through the movie. But this thing where they did with previous superhero movies where you have like the first 35 minutes of the film is them getting their powers and learning their powers, just like it's dull. Like we're not getting any character development or anything. It's just like, oh my god, I turn invisible, oh my god, my arms go all long, and it's like, yeah, we know that's why we came to the movie.
I mean, it kind of works when you're introducing new characters that haven't been done before, because like no one really knows how they're done. I think a good example of this would probably be like Moon Knight or Shang-Chi, but then again, they're not like just dropping in the middle of the origin. They're just like picking it like a modern day and then going back to it.
But to be fair, in the Moon Knight show, they really don't do the Moon Knight origin. They sort of tell the origin kind of in bits and pieces throughout the show, so you don't have to sit there through a full episode of origin story. Because I don't like that. It's not interesting. It's on our show we talked about prequels the other day, our favorite prequels, and I think the prequels are just kind of basically flawed because you already know what's going to happen. It gets boring, I think.
I mean, the thing is, like, I feel with origin stories, I think they work best if you have like a lot of world building and foreshadowing to build on. I know I've had this experience with Xena, is that we really built up like too much lore of his backstory, so we had to like introduce all that first. But then I have these characters that I'm like, I could just drop in the middle, like drop hints of and explore later. It's like it would fit, but the way Marvel have been doing them, it works. It's like with the Spider-Man new trilogy, the new Spider-Man trilogy, or with the new Batman movies, like people already know the origins. These are well-known characters, so we don't really need to know their story. We just need to know what's happening now. We just need to know what their current adventure is, and then just drop hints of what people already know.
I think with that, I'm going to go on to my number one, which is of course Paste Pot Pete. No, it's not. It's Thanos. It's Thanos. Because Thanos is the best. I love him. He is because he can basically go toe to toe with everybody, and yet he's still interesting. I think there is a problem sometimes when you make characters too powerful, and as their power level increases, their interesting level drops. And Thanos, when he is written well, I think primarily when he's written by Jim Starlin, and there's other people that write him well too, but I think primarily Jim Starlin. he's a complex character. I mean, the thing you learn about Thanos relatively early on when you start to get into is the person who always defeats Thanos is Thanos, because he has a tick in his brain where he always leaves an opening. It's not even intentional for him. It's pathological. And he's not really evil either. He's sort of amoral. And I mean, especially if you get into the Infinity fill in the blank books that Starlin has been putting out over the past, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, you really get into the philosophical side of all this stuff. The Adam Warlock and Thanos and their relationship and how kind of weird that is. And yeah, it's just I like all that cosmic stuff. The Guardians, the Abnett and Lanning Guardians of the Galaxy stuff. And Thanos just fits in there so well. It's such a weird kind of like when you meet Jim Starlin, you can see that's the type of guy that would create that kind of character. And it's great. He's a great character, and they actually did him well in the movies, which is always kind of a nice surprising treat, because so often they do characters terribly in the movies. John, what are your Thanos thoughts?
I would have to say he was the first villain that I was ever really sympathetic for. I meant, I knew Doom's backstory and stuff like that, but when you found out again about the pathological tick in his head, that he, you felt sorry for him, and just the lengths that he went to try to woo this cosmic entity. I know it sounds crazy, but his motivations seemed genuine, or I don't want to say fixed, but again, he's just an interesting character. And again, it depends on who he's written by, but I would say for the most part, that character's always been wonderful. And I like him more than Darkseid.
Oh yeah, again, I do, but that's an easy for me because I'm a big DC guy. Alex, what do you think about Thanos?
I definitely agree with you guys. I don't know much about the character within the comics. I'm more familiar with the MCU version. I mean, the first time I was introduced to Thanos was in a Marvel What If story, in which the new Fantastic Four stuck together and took place during the Infinity Gauntlet saga, and so it was then the new Fantastic Four taking him down. The thing, like, I definitely agree is that, like, Thanos, I don't know much about him, so I don't know if this whole tick in his brain is because of his deviant gene or if that's what it is, but he definitely, with the MCU one, he was the first villain I could understand definitely did have a reason for doing what he did. I mean, even the universe, as expensive as probably only has an infinite amount of resources, but instead of just like choosing to make more resources, because that would probably just be less of a fact, he chose to like erupt half the destroy half the universe's population. And within the 5 years of the Avengers, you saw there was some good to that. Like, people united together. Whales were in New York. It was kind of like during when we were in the pandemic, when everyone stopped driving, everyone stopped going on boats. Like, all the water became clear, everything was greener, the air was fresher, and like so much so. And then Venice, the canals were so clear you could see the bottom, and dolphins were swimming up to the bays to interact with people. I do think that in terms compared to Darkseid, he does have more of an iconic story with him, with that the Infinity Gauntlet. I mean, you pull up Thanos, you could name that as like his most iconic story. You can say he has that. Darkseid is like, he doesn't have any plans, except the only thing you know about him is, like, you barely know about him, is that he wants to get the anti-life equation, which is a whole nother thing. But it's like, but at the same time, I feel like, I think it's to a point where, like, Thanos needs their new story to really make him pow. I feel like if he has one, but I feel like he should have more. There should be something that not Infinity related, but something just new that is really cemented. It'd be like, how Batman has all these different stories that stand out. I feel like Thanos is that one villain who could have all those that really stand out. I mean, he's got one already, which is, I guess, all you need. But I feel like he's just become so affiliated with the Infinity Gauntlet. That's all people really know him for as. I mean, they can't really name anything else. Which, again, he has over Darkseid. But the same is, like, this is the thing. Would you have that one thing, or would you be known for a bunch of little smaller things that people can name? So it's like, yeah.
I would like to push. I'm going to try and find the name of a few of those. There's a whole series of books that Starlin has done. It looks like going back, I don't know, several years, and it's the Infinity. Like there's the Infinity siblings where it's Thanos and Eros. The Infinity. God, I'm having a hard time finding these.
You mean Star Fox?
Huh?
Yes.
Star Fox?
Star
But-
Fox. Well,
Yeah.
Eros is his name. Star Fox. Like Eros is his name, and Star Fox is his super. Is like I.
His superhero identity. Yeah.
Um,
I will also say this. What I do love about Thanos is the fact that he worships, that he's so madly in love with the concept of death, which is in the Marvel universe a female persona, which is like, that's a pretty unique way to do it. Like you have someone obsessed with death. It's like they're doing all these bad stuff just to impress them. It's like it'll never be enough. They're chasing this one girl they can never have.
So it's the Infinity. There's actually like I don't know 5 or 6 or 7 of these. So Infinity Conflict, the Infinity Ending, the Infinity Siblings, the Infinity Conflict, the Infinity Revelation, the Infinity Relativity. Anyway, so they're basically these hardbound graphic novels, basically the series of graphic novels, and they're all very interesting and they're all Jim Starlin and it's good stuff. So I would recommend that. One thing I want to just mention real quickly before we go.
I still need to give up my last character.
Oh, that's right. I didn't go to you. I'm sorry.
No,
Because you guys switched places. So after I went to John, I was used to going anyway.
Oh.
On my screen, you guys switched places and that got me confused. Yes, go ahead. Number 1. I'm sorry. I apologize.
okay, so again, my list was in no particular order, but my last character for the night is another Flash villain, Captain Cold. And what I love about Captain Cold is like, what I love about Flash in general is that, like Spider-Man, he's got not one but 3 iconic arch enemies: Reverse Flash, Gorilla God, and Captain America. And it's always up in the air about who the original, the most mirrored reflection or like arch enemy to the Flash is. And to me, it's always been Captain Cold because they're always like such a great reverse dynamic in that Barry Allen is a police officer trying to uphold the law. Captain Cold is a crook trying to rob the place. They both have unfathomable power. Like Barry has like the power of friction to move fast. Captain Cold has a reverse of the power over absolute cold, a very concept that he can use to defeat the Flash. And he's weaponized it in a gun against the Flash, and he's using it to rob banks. He has the ability to be a great supervillain, but he doesn't want to be a supervillain. He just wants to make his big score. And when they dove into his origin story, you learned about how he became such a cold person, and that his father was bad. His only good person in his life was his grandfather, and he, even though he's like basically a bad guy, he's not completely heartless. He has a set of moral codes. Like he won't kill unless he has to, which is better than no killing women and children. And he has still a soft spot for his character, for his sister, Golden Glider, who he still loves very much and tries to keep out of his life, but looks after her. And like he rules over the rogues, like not as a gangster, but as a godfather, and that he protects them. He makes sure they uphold the rules. He makes sure Scudder is off drugs, that Heat Waves Pyromania is in check, that Trickster always behaves himself. And and so he's just to me, he's the pinnacleness. He's always been associated as Barry Allen's arch enemy, thanks to his time in the Legion of Doom. And I have to agree on so many other levels that he is Barry's one true arch enemy. And I always loved how he's like technically an anti-hero, bordering on anti-villain, going back and forth. Because like again, he's not entirely evil. He's just like has been such a bad deal in life. He doesn't know anything else. He feels like you have to move forward with a cold heart. He doesn't have a bad hope. And I always loved his Parker look. I always felt that was, even though it's a little out there and flashy, I always felt that was a great look for him and how it stood the test of time.
And I think most people think Wentworth Miller did a pretty good job playing him on Flash and Legends of Tomorrow. John, what do you think of the Cold One?
And again, so I was a big Flash fan when I first started collecting comics back in the 70s, and he only appeared like twice that I remember in the runs that I had. And again, it was that he was a crook, but he had a brain, and again, it was he seemed like he was kind of that one trick pony with the oh, he's going to slide on the ice, but there was always these new and different ways that he was using the power, his power. But again, like we talked earlier, Mirror Master though is still my favorite rogue, I think.
I mean, Mirror Master and Captain Cold are like tied with my favorite rogue, but I definitely will think Captain Cold takes the spot just like because he earns the top rank as one of Barry Allen, the Flash's top arch enemies. Again, like with the Flash, his arch enemy is set up like Spider-Man's that it's Doctor Octopus, Green Goblin, the Venom, and with Flash, it's Reverse Flash. I mean, Eberthon, Gorilla Grodd, and Captain Cold. And when I think of who to compare, who I would amalgamize Green Goblin with, it would be Captain Cold.
I unfortunately again more DC, and don't have a ton to say about it. Again, I sort of got off. I tried Legends of Tomorrow. I like a lot of the actors and stuff on there, but I do kind of feel like it just didn't quite work. But I thought Wentworth Miller was great, and I think his character is interesting. I did want to say one thing before we left that I think is kind of important. Nobody mentioned the Joker, and I'm happy about that because, to be honest, I am absolutely sick of the Joker. I could not see the Joker for a while and be very, very happy. There's so many takes, so many Joker takes, and I'm good. I'm good on Joker takes for a while. That being said, I wanted to ask, do you guys have anything you want to, what you're going on, anything coming out, anything you want to pitch?
The biggest thing that I have is again November 12th of this year, the mini con, which is going to be bigger than the Adventureland show, which is going to be at the Jordan Creek, it's not Jordan Creek. Stony Creek in Johnston. We have two guests we're featuring. One's going to be Phil Hester, of course, and the other is Rick. Oh, now I feel bad. I can't remember his last name. But he's done a lot of graphic novels and a lot of work for Marvel and DC. And he's coming in from Wisconsin, and he contacted us about coming, and we're just really happy to have him and actually be able to feature him. And he said that the two companies he does stuff with boy, I'm getting too old. There's two independent comic companies that he works with that he said that they'll make sure that they advertise our show in.
We'll put links down below in the description.
Yes. One of them's Top Shelf. I do remember that. Gotcha.
And Alex, do you have anything going on you want to tell people about?
Yes, I've started a new job recently, so I'll be kickstarting my comic book production back in the term. I actually I'm going to be releasing a preview for a new series this Saturday for self-promotion this Saturday. It's called Murado, Davy Jones' Devil Daughter, and it's about a pirate who's also a superhero, but more of an anti-hero. So it's like One Piece meets Aquaman meets Blackbeard. And I also I will also be at this show come November, and I will hopefully have some new books to see us. And again, you can find me by searching NRG Comics through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, DeviantArt. That's our main page. We also have a Patreon now, so you can go out there and you can get all sorts of cool stuff for only $7 a month that you're not going to get anywhere else. So this includes new characters, finished comic book pages that you can read ahead of time that you will not be posted anywhere else. I will get like a few awesome pinups done. We'll have some if we get enough the Patreons, we'll start doing OC commissions where we feature with our characters. So we got a lot going on there.
And we're still doing the channel over on Intoxicated Masculinity. Jim, who's usually on here, he unfortunately wasn't able to attend today. And this weekend we were putting out a video of our top 5 worst superhero movies. And next week I've got a little video showing you how to make a Moscow Mule. So if you're interested in superhero movies or drinking or both, watch both of those.
I will have to say the Moscow Mule is my favorite. Just a reminder too, we'll meet again on the 13th of July. I think we'll take up Mike's suggestion for a topic is your top rogues gallery, but it cannot be Batman, Spider-Man, or the Flash.
Sounds good to me. All right. I want to thank everybody for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and be safe.